a slow news day. Wait, no! Huge news! Massive!
Let's do it, Tom.
Seriously. Jim Rutherford stepping down, resigning as general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, citing personal reasons. Patrick Alvin, team's assistant GM, has been promoted to interim GM, and the search for a new GM will begin immediately. This is truly stunning news. Here's Jim Rutherford's own statement. It has been a great honor to serve as general manager of the Penguins and to hang 2 more Stanley Cup banners at PPG Paints Arena. I have so many people to thank, beginning with the owners, Ron Burkle and Mario Lemieux, and team president David Morehouse. He continued, there always has been so much support from everyone involved with the Penguins, both on the hockey and business staffs, and of course, from a special group of players led by Sidney Crosby. The fans here have been tremendous to me and my family. I know it's a little unusual to have this happen during a season, but just felt this was the right time to step away. Wow. Now let's listen to the words of David Morehouse, who was just referred to in Rutherford's statement.
I want to clear up anyone's concerns. There's nothing wrong with Jim Rutherford's health, I can tell you that. Judging from the minutes on his cell phone and all the deals he's constantly trying to make, and the 5-mile walks he's on every day when I do talk to him, he's perfectly healthy. Discussion was last night. And I had a discussion with Jim, just Jim and I, and Jim had his mind made up. The ownership, Mary Lemieux and Ron Burkle and myself will be involved in the search. The criteria is same criteria we've had here for the last almost 15 years. It's to win the Stanley Cup. I don't think there's much more of a criteria than that.
He's in the Hall of Fame. Class of 2019. I should recite the names of all the modern-day GMs who've taken 2 different franchises to the Stanley Cup and won it. Jim Rutherford, and that's it. He has had such a distinguished career, to say nothing of the longevity of it. A GM since 94-95. If you think Billy Lindsay looks like Rick Schroeder now, you should have seen him mid-90s. NYPD Blue. And he resigns, as he put it, at an unusual time, but it's the right time. Billy Lindsay, Kevin Weeks, your reaction to this. You first, Billy. This is news that has sent shockwaves around the entire league.
It's unusual. One of the game's best GMs. He's been there in Pittsburgh a long time. One of the most aggressive GMs when it comes to trade deadline. And you talked about the 3 Stanley Cups. If there's a general manager, when his team wants to make a move at the deadline, he's going to go out and try and improve that team. Always active. You heard the CEO there mention that he's on his walks and he's always on his phone trying to improve this team. But when you've been at it since 94, 95, you've been going for a long stretch, and maybe a wear and tear of this year, COVID, you just don't know what's going on in a personal life, but it sounds like he's healthy. That is a good thing. If he wants to walk away, that's his choice. He's earned it from those standards. It's a tough blow for the Pittsburgh Penguins and during the course of a season just getting started. So see what kinds of moves that they want to make. But all the respect to Jim Rutherford. Wish him the best, and wherever he goes from here, his legacy cemented.
Hey, Weeksy, this point that he made about being aggressive, 51 moves in 7 years. What I want to ask you about, you're like John Gruden. Every time there was an opening in the NFL, John Gruden's name came up. Similar thing with you. So instead of asking you about Pittsburgh Penguins' interest and all that, this GM job, this position, where this team is at, what makes it an appealing job? Because clearly they're going to have to find an answer to try to replace a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I don't think you replace the Hall of Famer. I think that he's pretty irreplaceable in that sense. But I'll just tie a bow on echoing what you said. I couldn't agree more. I played for Jimmy, rather. And even going back to my days in the OHL, when him and Mr. Carmanos ran the Detroit Junior Wings, they ran that like an NHL team. And, of course, then with the purchase of Hartford and then bringing the team from Hartford to Greensboro to ultimately Raleigh, you could have him in the Hall of Famer as a builder as well, let alone as a general manager. So I love playing for him. He's a first-class person. He knows that. I'm sure he's probably tuned in and watching. An ace of a person, an ace of a general manager. And what I love about Jimmy is he did it under 2 different financial situations. He did it in Raleigh where there are some more financial restrictions, so to speak, and he's done it here back-to-back in Pittsburgh, Tone, as you pointed out. This is a model franchise. I mean, this is a model franchise. Make no mistake about it. They are perfectly assembled. They've got great ownership group, obviously, in Ron Burkland, the great Mayor Lemieux. Dave Morehouse is their president. They're a community team. They're a team that's continued to grow. They have a great building in PPG Paints Arena and a great practice facility in the UPMC Penguins medical facility that's state-of-the-art. There's a lot to like. They're growing youth hockey in Pittsburgh and greater Pittsburgh. We have NHLers that have come out of there, be it Trocheck, be it John Gibson, with another shutout, I might add, for the Anaheim Ducks. So this is a trophy franchise right now that's won cups, been to cups. They're very prestigious and a prestigious franchise, without question, one of the model ones, and of course one that a lot of people would love to work at.
So personal reasons, that is the type of answer that anyone interpersonally would respect. The question is now for the hockey team, how do they move forward? Because this hasn't been an ideal start, especially considering they have Hall of Famers on the roster. And while Evgeny Malkin did make a significant achievement, pulling himself up in the points record book in Penguins history, he hasn't been the most productive to this point.
As a player, your interactions with the GMs are mostly with your agent when you're trying to negotiate a contract. Yep. It doesn't go much beyond that. So the players are still going to go on the ice, and the GM's going to handle the duties, whoever's in place, Jim Rutherford, whoever wants to take over. So when you're playing, you just go out there and try and do your best, and it's not really a worry of yours. Once it comes to the trade deadline, you might want to ask, or some situations where Pierre-Luc Dubois or Patrick Laine, they want out of their team, that's where you have some interactions with the GM. Other than that, you just go out and play hockey. So it's interesting. And looking at the Penguins and their situation, I stated last night I would be in favor of trading Evgeny Malkin at this point if I could get something favorable.
What's favorable?
In return, a couple of good players, maybe a draft pick. And it's nothing against Malkin. It's just a situation. Mike Sullivan, the way that he plays and the way that they go hard. Malkin is one of those players at times that has drifted and can get away from that system. He likes to freelance a bit, and it's not always a problem, but when he's not going as it is at this moment, then it can become an issue and they can butt heads. And so from that standpoint, maybe you move on because they're winning hockey games and Malkin's not producing. So if you could get a good return, and this is where Jim Rutherford would come into play. He's not afraid to make a move like that.
Fearless.
Yeah.
Because he's been at it so long, he'll move or do anything with any player. Now, what kind of GM, if you go and Evgeny Malkin, you want to trade, that becomes a much more difficult situation if you got someone that hasn't been at the range a long time. So there's the case in Pittsburgh that would come to me, is with some of the star players, big contracts, how do they handle that with maybe an inexperienced GM?
I think the biggest thing for them now is, and I echo what Dave Morehouse says, is they've competed for a cup every year. So that's great that they have that from ownership, and I certainly understand where you're coming from too, Billy. I think the big thing for them is Malkin, if we're looking at him as an example. He's earned the right. He's played a long time. He's a future Hall of Fame lock. He's a generational player, obviously, as is the great Sidney Crosby, too. And maybe you see what Malkin, how he feels, where he's at. What's his temperature right now? Does he want to continue his career in Pittsburgh? Is he open to doing things outside of Pittsburgh or potential opportunities? Pat Brisson's his agent, and he also represents Sidney Crosby out of CAA Sports. Is one of the most influential agents in the world of professional sports right now. So maybe have an exploratory conversation and see what that is. But whoever takes the helm, you'd have to at least see where Malkin is at. He's earned that right and that level of respect. But one thing that'll be interesting, guys, as we go forward, and for a lot of you NHL viewers at home, what'll be interesting with this group is, you're right, they have started winning. They've started to get their game underneath them, and they still haven't even played their best level yet. To this point in the season, they're one of the several teams here in the East that have 9 points. So one of 3 teams, if I'm not mistaken. So that being said, there's still upside for this group.
And they've been chasing games.
They've been chasing games.
Yeah, they've been behind.
They've been behind.
Every single game.
Yeah. Totally.
They found a way to come back.
Right. And Billy, I mean, your entire career, you were a defensive player, penalty kill specialist. And I think the Pens, in watching them, they look a little bit loose right now and maybe disjointed. But let's also keep in mind, they've made a lot of moves.
Yeah.
This is a whole different roster right now in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
When you look at some of the movement, and of course, Kasperi Kapanen coming in, Matheson coming in.
And this is Jim Rutherford.
This is Jim, exactly. So I'd be curious to see, but I have a feeling that they're probably in the third gear of a fifth, sixth gear transmission right now. They haven't hit their stride quite yet to this point in the season.
He mentioned Pat Brisson, your son, Brendan. Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome at the
Absolutely.
World Juniors. Let's find out from our insider, Elliot Friedman, his take and what he's hearing about Jim Rutherford's resignation.
I think there's a couple of things at play here. First of all, his contract was up at the end of the season, and I don't think the Penguins had made any decisions about his future at this point in time. I think a lot of teams right now are in situations where they're kind of seeing where we go financially and what happens with the pandemic. But I also don't think they decided that he wasn't coming back. I think this was a conversation that really hadn't happened yet in terms of his future. I had heard some rumors today that maybe there were some disagreements on parts of on the direction of the franchise. Now, I've had some people saying to me that that was the case. I had other people disputing that to me. So, you know, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It just sounds to me like for whatever reason, he just thought he's been there 7 years. He's had an enormous success. He just thought it was time.
So that's the line we keep hearing. It was time. Well, the time now is for interim GM Patrick Alvin. We don't know much about him because he became an assistant GM in November. Here's what's in front of him. Now, he's obviously no stranger to the organization, going all the way back to 2012. Plenty of continuity. As the interim GM, I'm coming back to you, Billy Lindsay, because you said the GM doesn't typically have day-to-day interactions with the players. What does he want to do in his first few days in this role?
For him, I would address the hockey team and introduce myself and get down there. Sometimes the assistant GM is
of course
there, and if you want and bring in, I would come in with some of my star players and Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and that type of group. But it starts with the ownership. He's going to have to sit down. The first thing that they're going to go is with ownership and the direction. And what he sees with his direction as the interim GM, in which way they want to go. You heard maybe that was part of the leaving for Jim Rutherford, that he wasn't all on board with the direction that they wanted to take. So Alvin, if he wants to go there, then he's going to have to be on board. Ownership's going to say, this is what we want. This is how we want it to transpire. And if it means getting rid of money or getting rid of some players or taking a different direction, then he's going to have to get on the phone immediately and start calling. And he's going to have to introduce himself to the other GMs. That's also, I would be on the phone calling around to the other GMs. Getting conversations going, getting a dialogue, whatever it is, just to say hi, to see out there, because you have to have that dialogue with the other GMs in the leagues if you're going to make trades. So, one, I would address ownership talk. I would also have a brief conversation with the team, maybe some meetings with my star players, and then I would get on the horn with the rest of the league and start my work.
No question. Hey, listen, we're in a 24/7 time. This is a 24/7 business and a people business at the end of the day. And I think relationships now are more paramount than they've ever been. To your very point, you have to be in constant communication with people, not only here, but around the world too, by the way. You need to know what the landscape looks like. You need to know what's going on with the other 31 NHL franchises, soon to be 32 with Seattle on board coming on next year. But also, how does this impact your expansion draft strategy going forward too? And not to mention who some good free agents could be out there, what's happening over in the KHL, who are you talking to in Germany, all these different variables that can come into play as they're looking at this immediate group, to your point, Chili, but also as they look and chart their course going forward. And of course, all that has to go through the lens of the ownership group, and there has to be a symbiotic relationship there. But I think time is of the essence for them, simply because of the fact that, hey, nobody's waiting. This is a truncated season. We're in a compressed schedule. And to your point, hey, if you're not on the phone, somebody else is.
Yeah.
And if you're not exploring some potential situations, some other GMs could be. So
you have to know what's going on out there.
Big time. Big time. Couldn't agree more.
The guy who just said that when he walked in today, he was on the phone. You and I both saw it. He's a man of his word.